I think my view is that what happened in 1994 wasn't totally insignificant. That giving people the vote is a good thing. Like, it was a good thing. It was a major victory. But it wasn't sufficient. So what we started to believe somewhere along the line is that that's all we need to do, is just give people the vote. And that was never the goal of the liberation movement. Just give votes and then sit back and everything's fine.
He's a hustler, unbreakable, a people's person, and a future billionaire. This is The Hustler's Corner with Sibusiso Liope, well known to you and I as DJ Smooth.
Hello guys, big homie Spuda here, straight out of Johannesburg in South Africa. And welcome to The Hustler's Corner. I think the first thing we're going to do is go straight to that shop sign over there. We click it on the count of 1, 2, 3, let's go. Click, 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 click. Thank you. The second thing we're gonna do, go to that subscribe button over there and press that click. Thank you so much, guys. We appreciate you guys. We are excited because we are moving into a new world. The new world has already started. We are in the fourth industrial revolution. A lot of things are changing. We are adapting to a new way of doing things and living. But if there's anything that the fourth industrial revolution is bringing, is for all of us as hustlers out there to find new ways of getting ourselves out there. Or if your hustle is clothing or selling or music or whatever it is, use technology because it's on your side. You just use it the best way you can to up your hustle. You know, so the person that's here as well today is a person who's doing exactly that. They're using digital media to grow not only their brand, but to help people like you and I understand politics. A lot of the times, politics, I've always been intimidated by the big words. I never understood it. I never studied political science. And as I was growing up, I was more focused in music and media and entertainment, music, celebrities. I only just started focusing or being familiar with what is actually going on in the country when I started getting into my late 20s a little bit, but grand hardcore in my 30s. Now, if I can only start familiarizing myself to politics in my 30s and only start understanding it now in my 40s, I can only imagine how many people out there in South Africa don't know what's going on. And you've got the mainstream media that fits a certain narrative. And they always say he who pays controls the narrative, right? So a lot of the times people who own the media, sometimes they're also pushing their own narratives as well. There's also propaganda, there's also politicians, etc. We need independent voices, independent media voices that will simplify politics. People that are going to make us understand what is actually going on in our country. And you guys, as young as you are, whether you're older, understand politics because it affects your hustle, it affects your business, it affects your future, it affects the future of your children, your community, etc., etc., etc. So I went out there to go find somebody that I think can simplify a couple of things for us and also in the meantime share their story to inspire a new generation of hustlers out there. Remember, as a hustler, you're not only a businessman. There's people who are digital entrepreneurs. They do not necessarily have to go set up a big traditional business, but they can set up an online business and trade. And people do different things. So the person that I brought in here today is very, very enlightened. Okay, let me introduce you guys. I will not be doing much of the talking. They will be, because I want to hear as much as I can from their story. Okay, let's go. Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh is a postdoctoral fellow at the Wits Institute for Social and Economic Research. He holds a DPhil, if that's what it's called, in international relations from University of Oxford. His first book, Democracy and Delusion, The 10 Myths in South African Politics, was an instant top seller. It won the City Press Tafelberg Nonfiction Award and was long listed for the Sunday Times Ellen Payton Nonfiction Award. The book was accompanied by a rap album of the same name. Now, Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh's popular YouTube channel, the Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh Experience, abbreviated SMWX, it explores South African politics through interviews and analysis. He is based in Johannesburg. For more, go visit SizweMpofu-Walsh.com, or you can go to YouTube and go search for his channel. It's SMWX. You will be informed, just like we are also starting to get informed, because we I'm one of his fans. So we're going to be talking about his brand new offering, his second book. This one is called The New Apartheid, as we would call it. The New Apartheid. It explodes the myth that apartheid is a thing of the past. A hugely important book. This is a quote by Advocate Tembeka Ngcukaitobi. Apartheid did not die. It was privatized. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh.
Rasbu, great to be with you. Eta.
Let me put it here, actually, like
yeah,
this.
perfect.
Can you see
I love
like
it?
this?
I love it.
Yeah. That's how I always put my more fire there.
This is a very important place on your YouTube channel, so I'm glad that this book has this pride of place.
Yeah, it's beautiful because as the conversation is going on, it's there.
Yeah.
And I've done all of my episode on the Hustlers Corner. I've done the same with my more fire product placement, you know?
Yeah.
So welcome and thank you for the
Thank you
visit.
so much. It's really great to be here. As someone who's been working a lot on YouTube, I've been watching what you've been doing with the Hustlers Corner. But I mean, your support for my work goes way back. I was even telling you that when I was a young rapper, I walked into YFM studios and we had an interview with DJ Sbu, with the rap group Entity that I was part of. And we honestly were so excited that you granted us an interview. Like, you can't even believe what that meant to us. And I know that even back then, AKA was really, and Nhlanhla, who was also part of Entity at the time, we were on Seventh Heaven just because we were on your show. And you were the first person to give us a big interview. So that was like 2005 or 6. So you've been doing it since then. And I couldn't be more glad to join your platform today, all these years later.
And thank you very much, my brother. I appreciate those words. I'm very humbled. I'm very proud of what you've achieved over the years and what you are becoming. It can't help me. I can't help but just be proud of you.
Thank you.
So what he's just said, I only just figured out now. I remember the Entity interview, but I obviously would remember AKA, right? But then I find out now that you were also a part of Entity. I was like, so you were one of the guys.
Yep.
But okay, let's reverse it to many, many years back. I'm interested in the story, you know?
Sure.
Because the story gives us a context as to why people do what they do now and what are they doing it for. Or for whatever reason, it's always nice to have a story behind a person that does something.
Sure.
I would love to hear your story. Many, many years back, where were you born? Who are you? Where are you from? And just share with us your story. I won't do much of the talking, but I'm interested in hearing your story. I'd love to inspire our younger audiences out there with some of the amazing things you've been able to achieve in your young life.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. I was born here in Joburg, and my mother was a university lecturer. And my father, who many people know, Advocate Mpofu, was actually a student at Wits. So my mom was a lecturer, he was a student. And I was born.
Yeah.
And obviously my mom being white, him being black. I was born in 1989, and they were both very fiery political activists. And so I was born at a moment where the country was very much at a tipping point in the late 80s to early 90s. And my parents were, coming from these different perspectives, white, black, but both very involved in ANC politics, very involved in the struggle. My father was often detained. My mom was the chairperson of her ANC branch. As a white woman, that was rare at the time. And that was the context into which I was born. And the first place I ever lived was a university residence where my mom was the warden, Barnato Hall at Wits. And that's where I was born and grew up. And from that moment, for example, with my dad, many people see his success now, but few actually know his journey. You must get him on the show maybe one of these days.
That actually would be great.
Yeah, because I'm always telling him to write. But when I was born, he wasn't far from being rich. He wasn't even like known. He wasn't even a lawyer yet. He was still doing his articles to become a lawyer. And so my mom was really the person who supported me right from the earliest days. And then as he started moving up, started getting his articles, becoming an advocate, started getting more money to support himself, then he, also started contributing financially and eventually paid for my whole education and sent me to some of the best schools in the country. But it's interesting to me that people know that part of my life, but they don't know the earliest part, which was really a period of my parents sacrificing, struggling, and then eventually getting themselves both to the point where they are now. So yeah, that's the early part of the story, and that's how it starts.
I can imagine growing up, being around students on campus. When did it dawn to you at an early age that you're actually at a campus? This is not normal. People don't live in a campus. Well, students live in a campus for a couple of years, but people live in residential areas. And how did that shape your youth?
Yeah, it's interesting because I only realized that I was at a campus later. It was just normal and the place that I lived, and I was always meeting new people that seemed very old to me now, but I realized they were just young students at the time. And that university, Wits, but also that residence was the first mixed race residence in Wits. And so it was a place where many, many struggle leaders actually got their education. And so as I grew up and I'd see someone on the TV, my mom would always say, "Oh, you know that person. When you were young, you went to their room and they played with you." And so I always grew up like knowing that the people who were making change, I had somehow come into contact with them or known them at the early stages of their life, and that was always fascinating to me. And people would always say to me, "Oh, I knew you when you were a kid," and I wouldn't remember them, but they would always be like, "Yes, when I was at university, your mom, I knew your dad, I knew you," and that was just like the constant story.
I'm sure you sort of stood out somehow because you were a kid on campus.
Oh yeah,
and people are not used to that. So
I had a huge afro.
Oh, okay.
So believe me, I stood out. I was like, firstly, like you had this white mother, this mixed race baby with a huge afro, and yeah, we were. You couldn't mistake us, that's for sure. And of course, like much as it was amazing growing up within the struggle tradition, I was also very much aware of some of the abuse that my mom took and some of the derision that she got from her white colleagues. And I was always very aware when I was a bit older. I didn't like to go out in public with her because she would always get asked, "Where did you get him from?" So it was always like people assumed that she had adopted me because it was so rare. And so I would always like, there was like a year in my life where I was like, "I'm not going out with you because I don't want to be seen and just have people even think that and being asked those questions." So that was like one of my earliest memories of the difficulties of the moment.
Yeah. Also, I would like to know further more about that because the only, I think a lot of Black people they would understand it from a perspective of phumekasi, gibeli transport, uyesingamleni, uyofunda small C. It's a different lifestyle. It's a different environment. Ugibeli transport intambama uyabuya usekasi. It's a different environment. Unabantu abamnyama. Now usekasi ubonakala sengathi you're a cheese boy. Langalena, you sort of don't belong in a way because you come from the hood. So, a lot of, obviously, I didn't go to any multiracial schools, but a lot of my younger cousins and a lot of people maybe who are watching, they've experienced that. But I can only imagine having a white and a Black parent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating from so many perspectives, but one of them is is like going to family events. And so my mom had family in the UK, so I would like fly to England and I'd see like this white family, and I'd be the only black person, but I'm also their family, and I'm like, I feel so distant, but I'm also so intimate because you're literally my blood, or then I'd go Ezlalin and like Xhoseni, and I'd be in the deep rural Eastern Cape. Same thing. There I'm called Umlungu. And again, like I feel a family bond, but I also know that people see me in a certain different light. But at the same time as you never quite have that feeling that you're with someone identical, you also have a very broad spectrum of perspectives. So even though I don't fully know what it's like to be white in South Africa, or even to be black in South Africa, although I regard myself as black in a political sense, I'm very able to occupy different positions that other people aren't. And that, I think, has helped with my writing, because when I write from many different perspectives. And so while there are drawbacks, there are also really interesting ways of seeing and ways of being.
There's also lots of positives around it that you had to focus on and draw from, right?
Yeah, sure.
Schooling?
So schooling, I went first to quite a multiracial private school, but it was lower down the fees spectrum. So I would say it was similar to a very good Model C school.
This is where in Joburg?
This is in Joburg. And also important to note that I was raised in a single parent household. So I was raised by my mom. Although, as I say, my dad was always an important part of my life and contributed more and more. But again, people always see me through the lens of my father. And it's funny because like I was raised by my mother, and she's erased in the story of my life often. So yeah, I went to this private school, and yeah, like.
Sorry, guys.
Sure,
There's a. Please, guys, please.
Yeah, so the school is called Sacred Heart College. It's in Observatory in Joburg.
Yeah, I know it. Next to you.
Sacred Heart. Yeah, exactly.
YFM was not far from there.
Of
you
course.
Go down the mountain.
Of course, yeah.
There's a valley.
So my mom lived in Observatory for a long time. My father lived in Yeovil.
Yeah.
And that school was also a place where struggle parents sent their children. So just in the transition into the 90s, struggle parents are now starting to get some money. They're working in government. So the Zumas went there, Mandelas went there, various illustrious struggle families sent their kids and their grandkids there. And it was a rare multiracial place in the mid-90s. And that's where I went to school, started loving music, started loving drama, started loving soccer. Those were my three loves.
So soccer, music, and drama.
And drama.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So on some days you're doing drama after school,
Yeah.
some days music.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And how did entity happen?
So now life is progressing and my parents are doing better and better. So now we've gone from living in a university residence with my mom to moving into Observatory, my father, Yeovil. Now my father's like becoming an advocate proper. Over those 10 years, he's built up a reputation as a legal practitioner. My mom has started her own business now. She's left the university. And for the first time, my parents are in a really good financial position. So I end up going to St. John's College now, which is, one of the elite schools in the country. Boys' school, traditional culture. I get there and suddenly it's 90% white. So it's like, okay, we're in South Africa. And suddenly now I'm surrounded by white people in this super elite school. And so the black students there found a way to come together around hip hop at the time, because we were feeling alienated, but we were hearing this confident black expression coming out of SA, but also coming out of the States. And we were gravitating towards that, and finding our own voices. An Entity was a rap group that was created at the school at the time by the black students who were feeling alienated. And hip hop was bringing us together. And that's how we got together. In fact, Entity started as a dance group.
Oh.
With like 8 different members. And then slowly but surely, like, people started leaving. But then they started holding auditions. And then I learned how to rap and beatbox, like, in secret. And then I auditioned for the group. And then they were like, no, you can be part of Entity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's so amazing. I think one would look at, I remember that YFM interview very well, and geez, man, I remember it because those days were so memorable. Bro, YFM was a lot of fun, man. Oh,
like that era.
So much fun, man. That era was amazing.
It was something. But something.
It's still unfathomable in my mind that you're actually one of the guys in Entity when I compare what Entity was and who you are today.
Yeah.
Or let me say, maybe for people out there sort of comprehend what I'm trying to say. One of the people that emerged from Entity was AKA, and shout out to AKA. Very proud of you, bro. Everything you've achieved. I look at AKA and I look at you, right? You guys have different careers and you're both successful in your own right. So somebody can ask and be like, wow, from music, you moved from rapping with AKA and being his team member in a group to being the person that you are and following politics, etc. But then you also get the background of where you come from as well.
Sure.
From the parents.
Sure.
I'm trying to go somewhere with this. Then park that. Then you've got people like me who music, TV, radio, businessmen. But somehow it all connects. I'm the same person. I'm doing these things. I've done them, and they are me.
Yeah.
That's how I can understand you being able to release a which we'll talk about, an album and a book at the same time. And that is incredible because it's you expressing yourself through different art forms, right?
Yeah.
And platforms.
Exactly.
So with that being said, I know it might not make sense right now, but it'll make sense later. You are in this rap group, you are progressing in your life, and then now you have to go to varsity.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the varsity days leading all the way up to you becoming interested more and more into politics.
So just on the Entity thing, I've always thought it would be a fascinating movie, actually, to take the 3 of us, actually, because there's also Nhlanhla, who was the 3rd member of the group.
Hey, shout out to Nhlanhla. I haven't seen him in a while.
Shout out to Nhlanhla, who also became a lawyer and now has a digital content business of his own. Also stepped away, didn't want anything to do with the fame, got a taste of it and went in. So the 3 different directions that we went in, I've always thought are fascinating. But yeah, like one important moment came after St. John's. So I matriculated. And then in 2007, because I had to go through Xhosa initiation, I then went to go and live in the Eastern Cape for
Big up
for
for
a year.
that, brother. Big
Yeah,
up for that.
yeah. So Ulwaluko was very important in my family. So I went to go and live in the Eastern Cape for a year. Learned how to speak Xhosa properly, or at least better than I could speak it at the time. And that year profoundly shaped me because I was living ezilalini and seeing South Africa from a perspective I'd never seen it before. And that's when Entity broke up because we were just going in too many different directions. AKA wanted to be a musician. Nhlanhla was, studying to be a lawyer. I was off, on my journey. And we split apart. And then I went to UCT after that and started studying politics, philosophy, economics, and really starting a journey more towards a political direction rather than the musical direction that I was on before from that Eastern Cape experience.
And how was your experience in UCT?
UCT was interesting again because it was another elite space, a space where Black representation was still minimal at the time. It's got better since then. I went there and started there in 2008. But again, those feelings of alienation that started at St. John's, came back at UCT again. Why are all my lecturers white? Why are all the senior administrators white? Why are there so few Black students? And because I was studying politics and starting to read more about, Black liberation thought, economics, going into the politics and the philosophy of it all, I started being able to develop an outlook and a perspective that was founded in the literature that I was reading, that supported my own perspectives. And that was really important for me to educate myself and start forming my own opinions based on what I was reading as I went through the university journey. And then eventually I joined the SRC at UCT, became SRC President, and that was the first time that I saw what it was like to actually have some political power. It wasn't a lot, but when you're SRC President on campus,
I know very well. I remember our SRC President. They had some privileges,
Yeah. So that was also really fascinating for me, to be in a position where I could bring some practical experience, even in a very small setting at a very young age, to some of the things I was reading.
What did being a SRC president at UCT teach you?
It taught me a lot of practical lessons. The one was that the SRC that I led was very divided, because there were different political parties on the SRC. So I had to figure out either the SRC was going to break apart and our entire term of office was just going to be a disaster, or somehow we were going to have to come together. And so when we were dividing positions in the SRC up, we took a decision to bring people who are even in the minority into the leadership group. And that is what bound the SRC, and then it eventually started doing important things. The other one was the question of fees. This was years before fees must fall, probably 7, 8 years before fees must fall. But
my little brother, my little brother was SRC president during fees must fall.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rorisang Musedi.
Okay, that's your little
Sorry,
brother.
go ahead. Yeah.
That's blown my mind more than me being an entity blew your mind.
Yeah, that's my kid, bro.
No. He's
sorry for disturbing you.
No. Shout out to him, and shout out to the work he's done and the work he's doing at the presidency. I think I saw recently. So, shout out to him. But the fees question became a live one because we could see how it was affecting people's lives even as far back as 2009, 2010. And our SRC did a lot of work around that, not as much as the fees must fall generation, but we managed to get the university to bring the fees down more than they ever had because we'd researched the way the university was actually exploiting students. And we actually found that they had more than enough money. Like, it wasn't a question of we need these fees. It was a question of, no, we want to keep a certain surplus in our budget. And if we don't have a surplus, then we don't know what we'll do next year. It's like we don't have time to be talking about surpluses when, this money matters now. And that was eye-opening, and it made me sympathetic to the call of fees must fall because I had seen the numbers in the university and sat on the council and seen the way the university pretended like it was being financially prudent, but it was actually exploiting Black students particularly.
What would you say, or what type of a leader would you say you were? I think I always was interested in the intersection of culture and politics.
So even then I would use rap, and I would like at like the freshers fair or whatever, I would rap about what the SRC is going to do. And so I was always interested in like capturing people's imagination with art, but then following that through with like a political program. So I think that was one of the things I tried to do. Hardworking, and people saw that in the SRC, like that we did a lot of work, and we are remembered for doing that. And then also trying to unify, like I said, trying to bring lots of different perspectives together and then chart a way forward in a way that doesn't take away from the mission, the fundamental mission, which goes back to the liberation mission, which my parents were interested in, which is how do particularly Black students from disenfranchised households or backgrounds, how do they get a fair shot and a seat, not just a seat, but a meaningful seat at the table of these institutions where they've been excluded for so long, and become the drivers of those institutions, not just recipients of those institutions.
Oxford?
Yep. So after UCT, I had always wanted to go to a university like Oxford. Applied for a scholarship, applied for a number of scholarships. And so then there's a scholarship called the Rhodes Scholarship, which I applied for. They take like 5 students from the country a year from every university.
Wow.
And so I got to the final round of that scholarship. And there were about 10 of us. And like, it was just such a dream I just wanted to go to one of the best universities, just to be there and to see if I could hack it. And I was so sure I got it. And the selection committee came back and they were like, and they put us all in a room and they said, you, and you have got it. You, and you. Sorry, you didn't get it.
Sure,
just like that. It was like it was idols or something for universities.
Wow. Yeah.
So that broke me, because I'd done so much. I'd done the SRC President thing. I had the academic background, and I just didn't get it, And that really was a tough moment for me. But I applied for another scholarship, equally competitive, and then I got that one, And I got to go to Oxford first to do my master's.
Sorry, before you continue, give them a plug, because they educated you, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Rhodes must fall.
No, I'm saying the scholarship.
Yeah, for sure. So the Rhodes Scholarship must fall. My scholarship was called the Weidenfeld Scholarship. Weidenfeld.
Oh, the Weidenfeld. Okay.
Yeah, and
thank you guys for educating this guy.
Thank you, Weidenfeld Scholarship. Shout out to the Weidenfeld Scholarship. And it's open to South Africans, and it's just one of those things we don't know about because it's not broadcasted enough. But like South Africans, if you've got good marks, if you want to go to Oxford, check out the Weidenfeld Scholarship. You literally could be fully funded to go to Oxford, do your masters, do your doctorate, and that's how it happened.
Mm. And then were you studying from here, or you had to migrate and go?
Yeah, I had to go. In 2013, I went over to Oxford, had to move there. I'd also got married. So my wife then started studying in Scotland, and we moved there. And I spent a good 7 years at Oxford doing my master's and then my PhD after that. And that was such a fascinating experience, bro, because so few Black South Africans, even still today, have been to Oxford. And that's like where the best of the best go. And I remember the first day I had a class, and the class was taken by this world-leading professor. And it was at the top of this tower. So we walked up this spiral staircase to get to the top of the tower. And we walk in, it's a wooden library, like quite a small room, like ancient books all around, and the professor sitting at the head of the table, and they're like spaces for 5 people. And we must sit there for 2 hours working with this professor through like the readings and whatever. Like you can't hide, you know, and be like, I haven't done the reading. Like that's where you figure out whether you cut it or not, you know. And it was tough at the beginning because everyone else had been to Harvard, Cambridge, you know, all these fancy institutions overseas. I was the only person from South Africa, let alone a Black South African. But slowly but surely, I felt myself rising to the Oxford standard. And it just taught me so much about how much we still have to give and how globally competitive we are, but we don't even know it.
I always say that South Africans are not aware of actually how awesome, how great, how talented, how capable, how best of the best they are, better than a whole lot of other people that when they're here at home, they look up to.
Completely.
That's the reason why I always say this. That's the reason why when any one of us takes that leap of faith to be like, you know what, I'm going to pursue a career internationally.
Yeah.
I believe they always shine. I've seen it with myself, with a lot of my international travels or my international visits or friends or some of my ventures, some of the things I've done overseas.
For sure.
People can't fathom that I've done what I've done.
Yeah, absolutely.
They actually can't believe.
Yeah. And in South Africa, people are like,
South Africa is like, you know what I mean? And when you're out, it's like, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such an important point. And that's why I started writing books. Because when I was in South Africa, people were like, oh yeah, Dali Mpofu's son, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? What was so important for me when I went to Oxford, nobody knew who my father was. Like nobody gave a damn or even knew. And I was always curious, if no one knew who my father was, how would I fare? Like, to what extent is it because, people know my father? And at Oxford, people were like, you know, you've actually got something. Like, and I was like, oh, so it's not you think you know me because of you know who my father is. Like, you're seeing something in me specifically. And that was important for me. And I started thinking, hold on a second. If people at Oxford are listening to me, then maybe I do have something, you know? So like, why shouldn't I write a book, you know? And it took that experience for me to come back home and say, you know what? People will figure it out in time. You know, some people will think I'm just trying to pursue my father's agenda. Others will think, you know, I'm a mouthpiece for some other agenda. But eventually people will learn, like, I have something to say and it's got some value, and they'll figure it out.
Politics is an interesting subject, which is very, very important in every country, and every human being should learn and sort of be, you don't have to know it like he does, but just sort of be awake as to what's going on in your country. And that's what you're doing now. You're waking a lot of people up. Now, I'm one of your subscribers on your channel. I'm one of your early subscribers.
Yeah.
So many things I've learned from you, and you've enlightened, basically, Papa Missy and that I was not aware of.
I'm glad about that.
Same as what Julius has done. With Julius on Papa Missy over the years of a lot of things that I was not exposed to as far as how our country is run politically.
Yeah, for sure.
Now let's get into this book.
Yeah, for sure.
This book is a follow-up to the previous book that you did. Maybe let's talk about that one a bit.
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll get into this one.
It's a good place to start because that book was a lot about current affairs. It was about 10 different issues. I looked at 10 questions and then I wrote essays about those questions. So there was a chapter about Marikana. There was a chapter about fees must fall. There's a chapter about land. And what I realized at the end of writing that book was that it's all well and good to talk about current affairs and what's happening right now. But actually, there's a deeper crisis that lies behind all these headlines that we see every week. And so what's really important for our generation is not just to understand what's happening. Thank you, bro. Appreciate it. But wow, when you've got water poured for you by DJ Smooth, I mean, what more?
Come on.
Like, I can retire.
Come on, get out of here.
I'm putting it on my Twitter bio now. Yeah, so I started realizing like it's not just about understanding what's happening now. It's about going that layer deeper and trying to reframe what's happening in terms of a deeper crisis. And the link between that book and this book is that this book is now this book doesn't talk about headlines. It doesn't talk about pay back the money or anything of that sort. It talks about what is the fundamental crisis that is underlying so much of what's happening in our country. And that crisis I call the new apartheid.
This has been a hard book to write. I've been constantly haunted by the feeling of rediscovering and then inspecting and dissecting some long-suppressed horror. The evil of apartheid lies not in the number of people it killed, though it did kill many. Rather, its evil lies in the number of people it tyrannized. The grimmest feature of this monstrous system is its capacity for self-reinvention. And in 1994, apartheid has changed form. It is now dictated by markets rather than minds. Like a virus, it is neither dead nor alive, but survives through the people it afflicts. South Africa's story is often presented as a triumph of New World Order. But while formal apartheid was abolished decades ago, stark and distressing similarities persist. Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh explores the edifice of systemic racial oppression, the new apartheid, that continues to thrive despite or even because of our democratic system. This new apartheid is a privatized, decentralized, self-replicating vestige of the apartheid state. For the people of South Africa, it means poverty or paradise, separated by an inch of glass and a line of code. Mpofu-Walsh names our malice by tracing its impact on our use of space, law, wealth, technology, and punishment. The new apartheid is both a razor-sharp survey of the South African crisis and a call for far-reaching change. Unless we understand the new apartheid, we cannot start the urgent task of dismantling it. This book is provocative yet necessary, a layered and nuanced snapshot of South Africa, why we are not okay. The new apartheid stirs up deep thought and reflection. Somebody asks you from elokishini lapho engiphuma khona eThembisa, akahlala eMasantini, akagelezanga nokugeleza. Awungitshele mfana, le ncwadi le new apartheid, what is this new book about? What is the new apartheid? Simplify it for me.
That was a brilliant reading, by the way. And the book essentially is saying apartheid is still with us. We thought we killed it. We thought we destroyed it in 1994. But even though the government is no longer giving us apartheid is still in our society. And the legacy of apartheid continues to this day. That's what the book is about.
How?
So the thing I tried to show in the book, which I think is very important for this moment, is that in 1994, something very important happened. Yes, the ANC got state power. But what happened to the power that was in the state before that? Well, that power went into the private sphere, the private sector. It went into the private parts of South Africa where the government doesn't have power. And so when I say apartheid did not die, it was privatized. I mean that in 1994, apartheid went from government power into other forms of power in the economy, in ownership, in where we live, in technology, in law, in private security guards, in businesses, And so even though we have a democratic government, when we really look at our everyday lives, who controls our everyday lives? Who has power? Is it the government, or is it the private parties that exert that power over us? And in that private world of malls, of businesses, of guards, who holds the power?
Very interesting. A lot of us would think we are free now. Apartheid is no longer with us. It's not around anymore.
Yeah.
But our main issue is the economic, economic emancipation that we are all after.
Yeah.
We need the land.
Yeah.
And some of your thoughts as far as that is concerned. Land obviously controls the economy. It's a big part of the economy. Land and economy.
There's no doubt about that. One of the things I show in the book is that the ANC government has failed in its duty to people, especially Black people, to break apartheid hold over South Africa. And so what we thought in 1994 is if we have a democratically elected government, well, then obviously that government will then help the people and make sure that, resources are distributed to them, and slowly but surely they can pick themselves out of the poverty into which apartheid placed them. But what we actually saw was that apartheid power, which, as I said, went into the private world, started to influence the ANC as a government and diverting its priorities away from giving people land, away from giving people basic services, towards protecting the economic interests that have always been served by our economy. And so when we look at land, we have to ask ourselves, why after 3 decades have we not redistributed land? Because basically the government has decided not to. And that is a question we need to ask. Why would the government decide not to? And for me, it's because private interests have diverted the government's program. And we need the land, there's no doubt about that. Land has to be distributed. You can't have an economy where a small minority owns such a vast proportion of the wealth.
Why do we allow sophisticated apartheid to persist before our eyes as if death was never pronounced on it? This is a quote back in 2019 by Chief Justice Mogoeng. And then another quote by Sarah Nuttall in 2019. The question of when an epoch begins and when it can be deemed closed is always open to a multiplicity of responses. The velocity and unexpectedness of the social is such that naming it often comes afterwards, after the fact. And then I'll read the last quote by Henry Kenny.
Read this one. This one goes in.
It goes in, yeah? This is back in 1980. Dr. Nico Smith, a Dutch Reformed Church clergyman. I'll read it again from the top. Dr. Nico Smith, a Dutch Reformed Church clergyman, quoted Verwoerd as saying that he wanted to implant the concept of apartheid so deeply into society that no future government would be able to undo what had been done. Whether Verwoerd's boast, as reported by Smith, will be realized, if only in part, remains to be seen. Yeah. And I guess that's why as you get older, you get reading, you get more knowledgeable, you actually get to understand, no. Exactly. When somebody's being, or racism is not somebody's telling me that I'm a gaffer or I'm a nigger. Racism is in the system.
That's it. And like that, I knew it. And the more I read, because I went deep with this book, bro. Like I used all that I had learned at Oxford as a PhD student, and I went into the apartheid archives, and I read the prime ministers and I read the academics who were creating this idea of apartheid in the 1940s. And I traced it in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And the idea was, at some point, it doesn't matter if there's a democratic government, because we will have done what we need to do. And if there's a democratic government, they will never be able to undo what we've done.
And it looks like that is exactly what's going on now.
Absolutely. There have been important changes, but the structure of our society, when you said people reading this book, Ekasi, for example. Ekasi, why is there even still Ekasi? Because it was designed so that we should have these areas that we haven't even begun to dismantle. And we haven't scratched the surface, of the design. And we need to ask ourselves very serious questions about, are we thinking as deeply as the architects of apartheid thought to undo what they did? And right now we're not. Right now we think if we can just, do this little thing here and fix education there, like there's an entire system that has to be uprooted before we can call ourselves after apartheid.
I look at the system, and a lot of us, by virtue of being Black, automatically we are drawn towards other Black people from all over the world.
Sure.
The most popular Black people that we've all been influenced by growing up all the way till now, and the most loudest Black people globally is African Americans.
Sure.
If you listen to their plight and what they're going through, most of it is actually similar to what we're going through.
Absolutely. And that the fascinating thing for me was in the early 20th century, how the people who planned apartheid were in conversation with the people who were planning segregation in the US, were in conversation with the people in Germany who were creating their racial state, were in conversation with the people in Australia who were creating a white minority state there. And they were all learning from each other. And one of the craziest things that I read in this book, because we think of the horrors that have happened in other places as worse than have happened in South Africa. But many of the people speaking at that time about how they wanted to create segregated states said that, like, South Africa is going too far. Like, this is too much now,
So that's how deep in it we are.
That's how deep in it we are. Like, this thing was pursued relentlessly. And the planners knew, especially towards the late 1980s, that we don't need the government anymore. In fact, the government is a burden. We don't want to administer this thing and have to do all this work of keeping the society afloat. Hand over the government, because the structure is in place.
The damage has been done permanently.
The damage has been done. Why do we need to busy ourselves with running the government?
Why did the international community then at the time, or let me say other governments, put a spotlight on South Africa? Sorry, it's fine. You can keep recording. So you guys must know that I speak to people like Abu Theo Pat. No, Kren. Are you around?
Yeah, I'm on my way.
No.
Like 10 minutes late, but I'll be there now.
Take your time. I'll see you just now.
Okay, sure.
For me, it's the spotlight that was put on what happened from 94, which, we were kids at the time. I was like a little boy. And as I've learned, as I've grown over the years, and as the conversations are becoming louder and louder.
Yeah, sure.
Not necessarily focusing on an individual like Utata, but obviously the Rainbow Nation looks to me like Ngat Shy. It was like it was like just a smoke screen of some sort somehow.
Yeah.
that was just put out there and the marketing that went behind it and the noise that was made all over the world. But then you look at it from a different eye, you say, it was something good. It encouraged us to all be united. It encouraged us to all be one. But are we really one right now, 27 years later? I think that's what then the whole South Africa is waking up to. With It looks like more damage than was done than good. And it's like the more the years go, the more the layers start peeling off and the truth keeps coming out.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a good way of putting it. It's absolutely that. I think my view is that what happened in 1994 wasn't totally insignificant. That giving people the vote is a good thing. Like, it was a good thing. It was a major victory. But it wasn't sufficient. So what we started to believe somewhere along the line is that that's all we need to do is just give people the vote. And that was never the goal of the liberation movement. Just give votes and then sit back and everything's fine. It was always an intermediary step. We need to give people the votes because then we can give them a voice. But then the state, the society still has to liberate itself from there even. And then we stopped because of this media euphoria about 94. We started to believe the story that others were telling us about ourselves, that we had won. And we declared premature victory. And who did that serve the most? It served those apartheid forces who stepped back and said, let's celebrate. What does it do? It takes the pressure off us. We can now enjoy our wealth because the government is no longer, the subject of sanctions and all that stuff. So in a weird way, what I say in the book is South Africa is an interesting case of history being told by the losers rather than the winners.
You've got a couple of chapters here and it's very, very interesting. I like also how you break down the abbreviations. And I quickly will touch on a paragraph or two on the introduction that says, apartheid did not die, it was privatized. In this book, I pursue the simple thesis. The claim stems from a constellation of provocative questions. What are apartheid's afterlives? In present-day South Africa, a distorted duplicate of its apartheid predecessor. Is South Africa witnessing apartheid's reappearance in disguise? How, if at all, does apartheid persevere in spite of the constitution? That's what I always ask myself. Is apartheid's ultimate demise inevitable? What unforeseen consequences flowed from the negotiated settlement of the 90s? Why, when, and by whom was South Africa's transition from the apartheid declared over? What forms of apartheid oppression flourish under the pretext of democracy? Where does power reside in South Africa? And how is it exercised? Is apartheid autopoetic? Oh, I don't even know. I don't even know how to pronounce this word.
Quite the... Perfect.
What is that word?
Autopoetic.
Oh, autopoetic.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
In turn, these questions hinge on a central one. To what extent does apartheid persist after death was pronounced on it? In this book, I confront apartheid's immanence and eminence in South Africa's present. I trace apartheid's inequalities and iniquities beyond 1994. To do this is to suggest that apartheid is more than just a legacy, effigy of reverberating echo. It is to excavate and disentomb apartheid. It is to search beyond the pomp and pantomime of South Africa's democratic passage into what the poet Lebo Mashile calls the existential crisis of a miracle overstretched. Such a movie is at once shocking and familiar. Shocking because it erodes the founding myth of contemporary South Africa. Familiar because it unveils an eerie and unspoken spectra looming over the post-apartheid. Apartheid did not die. It was privatized. This is the idea to be confronted. It sounds shocking. It sounds scary. but I think it's a very much needed book for everybody to read.
Appreciate that. Appreciate the readings, by the way. It's actually nice to hear the words spoken because they take on a different meaning.
Yeah. And then that's why I was saying earlier, please give us the audio version in your own voice.
Yeah.
I think it's going to age well, this book.
You know, that was the goal. With the first one, I was writing about current affairs, and now 5 years later, I realized, it doesn't age well. So this one I wrote to live a very long time, and I hope it will.
When I wrote about entrepreneurship in my last book as well, that was the goal. A book that ages well.
Yeah.
And because of where we are in this situation that we're in as Black people, I focused on the solutions.
Sure.
Let people start learning to be independent and rely on themselves.
Yeah.
For me, that's my goal. And the main important thing that I'd like to drive my followers to is let them know how to make money. And my current book that I'm writing and some of the things that I'm learning now is strictly focusing on the money now, financial liberation. How do we create wealth? So with some of the new things like digital currencies coming to the fore all over the world now, I see that as an opportunity for a lot of Africans to liberate themselves by knowing those technologies. Right now, they're being taken advantage of, but you know, in all sorts of different ways. But my focus is now I want to learn not only just how to create wealth, but how does money flow? What is money? Is money worth the paper it's printed on? And what is the money that we know different from gold? And how does all of that, looking at history, compare to what's going on right now with this new digital revolution? That is my focus. And that's what I'll be writing about, the money side of things.
Love it.
And that will age well.
Yeah.
But what I love about your book, it'll also age well because now you're waking us up to, guys.
Yeah.
We're just not even scratching the surface.
Absolutely.
This thing goes way deeper and deeper. So that was intentional.
That was absolutely intentional. As I was writing it, I would constantly ask myself, if someone in the future, like decades later, was reading this, would they be able to get something out of this? And that was the goal. People who read it will be the judge. But I want this work to live for a very long time. And I don't know if I can write something like it again, to be honest. Like this might be the work that I'm remembered for. Because I went places with this that I don't know if I can ever go again.
Wow. How long did your research take you?
So writing this book, the main part of the writing took 3 years. But, you know, I would say that even from my early undergraduate days, you know, back in 2008, I started thinking, hold on, there's something wrong. There's something wrong here, you know. But the writing took about a good 3 years. And the majority of it then was done from early last year.
Okay.
Yeah. By the way, on the Rainbow Nation thing, the cover.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about the cover.
Yeah. It takes the apartheid flag and the South African flag and it stitches them together. And one of the things I found when you do that is actually you get a very interesting rainbow effect. So what is the Rainbow Nation? The Rainbow Nation actually is the combination of apartheid and the democratic state. And they haven't actually, we haven't got one or the other. We need to decide which one we want to be.
The book touches on space, law, wealth, technology, punishment. And then there's the conclusion there. It's got acknowledgements, endnotes, the index, and obviously it speaks about the author. I will not lie and say I've read the book. We're going to have a beautiful follow-up interview as soon as he releases the audio version. That time I would have read the book and it would be great for me to indulge in it. I only just got my copy now and I'm glad that it's signed. Thank you, bro.
Of course, bro.
Appreciate it, my brother. I'm so proud of you and congratulations on your new work. I just hope that all of us go out there to go read the book. Read the book. Have conversations. It's a conversation starter, much needed conversations. Some of them might not be comfortable, but they need to be had. What do we do then? What do future generations do? People who are watching this video 50 years from today.
Yeah. We need a vision that is as ambitious and more ambitious than the apartheid vision. When those architects came together to create a multi-generational system that still lives with us today, they had an ambition and they fulfilled it. And if they could do it, then we can certainly uproot that system and replace it with something more just. So the question for us is, how do we create a more just future? How do we transcend this crisis of stagnation that we're in now and create something entirely new? And that might take multiple generations, but our generation will be the minds who at least lay the foundation for that. And I believe that we have the minds to do it. And now we must execute.
And it excites me to see minds like yours, because it does say the future is really bright. And I'm happy that you, young as you are exposing this type of information to younger minds as well.
Absolutely.
So then there's a difference. You don't find Abu Sbuda only waking up in their 30s, so at least you can catch them younger, right?
Definitely. And to go back to the Oxford experience briefly, what I learned there was there's this culture where you'll catch up, you'll get it. Like, we're not going to babysit you. And when you write books in South Africa, people are often telling you, no, you have to try and make it simpler, etc. And it needs to be simple. It needs to be clear. But I want to bring people up rather than
dumb them
put
down.
My message down. And people get it. Like, I'm writing this book at a level that I know people will rise to, and I'm not looking down at my readers. And people will Google the word and rise to it. And only then can we have this debate. And I'm excited about that because there are people who never went to university, but I know they've read the book and they've caught the book, and they're saying things more deeply about the book than professors who are engaging with the book. And that's when I know that people have constantly been trying to feed a simple message to people who are much smarter than they realize.
Yeah, I've also realized that from back in the day, and as my audience has grown, I can, and as somebody who's worked in the media, I can tell that the audiences now are way smarter than they were 10 years ago.
You can feel that, hey?
You can actually feel it, yeah.
Definitely.
And it's beautiful. You can even see it on Twitter platforms. You can feel that people are more smarter now.
Absolutely.
And I think there's just this beautiful awakening that's happening.
Definitely.
And I think it's a global thing.
Yeah.
I think it's Black people all over the world. Not only just Black people. I think even with everybody else, there's just this awakening that's happening.
Definitely.
People are waking, and it's waking up, and I think it's a beautiful thing. I appreciate you, bro, and I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy to see you here.
Appreciate that.
Thank you for supporting us in the early days of Massive Metro as well.
Of course.
And just to see your growth, I'll continue to support, and I'll continue to be a fan, and not only just a fan, but your student, because I'm learning so much from you. I'm learning so much from him, guys, by being his subscriber on YouTube. Go subscribe to his YouTube page. If you don't understand what's going on in the country, don't understand politics, you don't have to be ashamed. Just like I'm not ashamed to say it on camera. I woke up late. Only now that I'm waking up. So wake up now, young as you are, wherever you are. Even if you're old, it's okay. Just take some time to do reading on these types of subjects. But when it comes to this book, I recommend you go get it and go read it. I'm going to go read it myself. But after this interview, actually, I'm even more interested to delve into it immediately after this interview. I'm so excited. You're going to be 40 in like a decade probably from now. You'll be my age. And then 2 decades later, you'll be 50. I would like for you to look at that camera and speak to a 50-year-old self.
Sure.
What would you like to say to Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, a 50-year-old you with your kids and your grandkids?
Sure.
Speak to yourself by looking at the lens over there. We'll send you the video, by the way. 20 years goes like this, bro.
That's interesting. And before I do that, which I will, it's interesting. We must have these conversations at different... We've already had these conversations in different eras of our lives. So we should just keep doing that. Yeah. And hopefully we'll be speaking at 50 and then we'll look back at this video.
Of course, I'll be all grey. Hey, sorry. If there's a call I can't miss, it's my mom's call.
Oh, no, by all means.
Mama, gunjani ma.
So Sizwe, DJ Spoo speaking to his mom right now.
Ngiyaxolisa ma, bengicela ukukufonela back ngiqedelela something nje khona manje.
Phela ngicela ukuthi really ungifonele back because ngifuna ukubuza something very serious.
Okay, mama.
Ngistart bakho ama-customer ya-complain.
Okay.
Ngiyaba-complaina ngawe. Bengifuna nje ukuba short ukuthi kanti why ungasayini.
Ngizoyisayina ma ngizokufonela nangiqeda ngizoyisayina ma ngiyaxolisa bengibhizi. Yebo ma bengibhizi ngiyaxolisa ma.
Ngoba vele kusasa ekuseni ngiyangasesayini lasePitori.
Okay ma ngizokufonela nangiqeda ngizoyisayina ma. Ma bengekho i-email yakhona by the way ngicela uyithumele futhi ne.
Bengekho kanjani? Angithi i-DJ Sizwe live.
Yebo ma. Ma singatshela abantu ama-email address wami. Okay ma ngizokufonela nangiqeda ma. Okay. Ayikho ma ngicela uyithumele futhi. Okay ma. Okay, bye-bye. My mom's is the boss, bro.
Wow.
When she says, hey, I can't even miss her call. When it's her, everything stops. You see, my mom's and my daughter,
Yeah.
I have to answer those calls.
I mean, I'm just going to be laughing when I look back at this and I'm 50 because... But no, maybe that's an important moment. Like, so I think I would certainly say, hopefully when I'm 50, I'll always take the calls that are important, no matter what's happening. So I think that's an important example. And don't be too hard on yourself, but also uproot the new apartheid.
Now let's speak to your last message to the people who've been watching. You know, it's one of those at the end of every interview. What's your advice to everyone or to the young people? What are your last words?
I think, every so often you'll hear a voice. It won't be often, but every so often you'll hear a voice that's guiding you to do something that you know you're supposed to be doing.
Thank you very much, guys, for watching. Young people out there doing great things with their lives. The question is, what are you doing with yours? We appreciate you for watching. Share the message, share the interview, press that like button. Don't forget to to click on that subscribe button as well. Thank you. This has been the Hustlers Corner with DJ Sizwe and Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh. Go get the book, The New Apartheid.
My name's Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, the author of The New Apartheid, and I have just been hustled by DJ Sizwe on the Hustlers Corner.